She was only 8 years old and invisible to the wealthy, the cleaner's daughter, forgotten in the halls of a luxury mansion. While doctors, therapists, and specialists from around the world failed to calm a non-stop screaming autistic boy, she walked into the room with a simple glass of water and did the impossible. What happened that day didn't just change the life of that child. It shook the certainties of an entire family. And when the security cameras revealed the truth, no one could pretend they hadn't seen. Before we dive into this story of courage, empathy, and transformation, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you enjoy stories that touch your heart and make you think, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. There's a new story every day that will move you. The mansion rose like a fortress of glass and concrete atop a gated community in the southern zone of São Paulo. From up there, the city seemed distant, blurred by pollution and altitude. Within those cold white walls, luxury was absolute. Italian marble floors, crystal chandeliers imported from Austria, contemporary art pieces hung like silent war trophies. Everything was planned, controlled, aseptic. Every detail obeyed a minimalist architectural design that had cost millions. Automated curtains opened and closed on programmed schedules. The temperature was regulated by invisible sensors. Even the silence there seemed artificial, constructed, guarded. Everything, absolutely everything, was under control. Everything except Arthur. Arthur was 4 years old. Dark, deep eyes that seemed to look through things rather than at them. Blonde hair inherited from his European mother, fair skin that rarely saw the sun because his routine didn't allow it. He had been diagnosed at 2 with severe autism, level 3, as the medical reports piled up in his father's office, organized in folders labeled by date and specialist, stated. Since then, the family's life had become an endless succession of consultations, imported experimental therapies, restrictive diets based on international research, medications adjusted and readjusted after every new crisis. Arthur didn't speak. He didn't respond to his own name, even when shouted. He would spend hours lining up toy cars in perfect rows or spinning plastic bottle caps with almost obsessive precision. And when something disrupted his routine, a change in schedule, an unexpected noise, a different light, he would explode. For the past 3 weeks, something had changed. No one knew what. Doctors investigated possible physical causes, infections, allergies, uncommunicated pain. Nothing. Therapists reviewed the entire routine, schedules, foods, visual stimuli. Nothing. Arthur had simply started screaming. It wasn't crying, it was a high-pitched, continuous, desperate scream that cut through the air like broken glass and echoed through the marble corridors of the mansion. It started early in the morning, around 6, and only stopped when his small body collapsed from exhaustion, usually after 8 in the evening. His parents had tried everything. They changed the lighting in the rooms, replacing cool bulbs with warm ones. They swapped sheets for softer fabrics. They eliminated all possible noises, turning off electronics, forbidding loud conversations. They hired a new occupational therapist, specializing in sensory integration, then another with a doctorate in applied behavior analysis. They called a renowned neurologist from Miami who came, examined Arthur for 2 hours, prescribed a cocktail of medications, and left without giving concrete answers. The maternal grandmother, worried and religious, suggested by phone that they call a priest. Sometimes faith helps where science can't reach, she said. They did. The priest blessed the boy, prayed, left holy water. Nothing worked. Arthur's father, a foreign investor with an unpronounceable surname and immeasurable fortune, began to openly talk about institutionalization. There were clinics in Switzerland, discreet, specialized in extreme cases, where children like Arthur could receive 24-hour care in completely controlled environments. Perhaps he needs a more structured environment, he told associates and consultants on the phone. his voice tense and tired as he looked out his office window at the empty garden where his son never played. The mother, Helena, oscillated between corrosive guilt and paralyzing despair. She, who had always controlled everything, the social calendar, the family's public image, the perfect home decor, the impeccable appearances, now found herself completely powerless in the face of her own son's screams. She would wake up in the middle of the night with the sound echoing in her head, even when Arthur was asleep. She cried in the bathroom, took anxiety medication, avoided looking at herself in the mirror. Among the many employees who sustained that routine of apparent perfection was Joanna. Joanna was a cleaner. She arrived at 6 in the morning, 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, and left after 5 in the afternoon. She was 42 years old, her body marked by decades of hard work, her hands rough from scrubbing floors, wiping surfaces, carrying buckets, broad shoulders that carried more than just the weight of household chores. She came from Paralelos, a distant southern neighborhood, the far end of the city, where asphalt gave way to mud on rainy days. She woke up at 4 in the morning to catch 2 crowded buses and then the subway. An almost 2-hour journey she made standing, holding her bag against her body. She didn't complain, she rarely smiled, but there was a striking firmness in her brown eyes, a silent strength, built over years of struggle, as if she knew something the employers would never learn, no matter how much money they had. Joanna had a daughter, Ayla, 8 years old. Dark skin like her mother, kinky hair always tied in 2 pigtails carefully made before leaving home, school uniform always clean and ironed, a worn but organized backpack on her shoulders. From time to time, when school let out early or on holidays, when there were no classes but Joanna had to work, she would bring Ayla to the mansion. Stay quiet. Don't touch anything that isn't yours. Help tidy up the toys in the child's room if I ask. She would always instruct before entering, her voice firm but loving. Ayla obeyed. She would spend hours in silence, organizing colorful building blocks, stacking picture books on shelves, wiping low shelves with a small cloth her mother gave her. The employers barely noticed her presence. To them, she was just another discreet shadow among the many who served that house. The maid, the driver, the gardener, the nanny, the security guard, all invisible, all necessary, all forgotten, but Ayla saw. She saw everything. Arthur sat in the corner of the enormous room, rocking back and forth in a repetitive, mechanical motion. His small hands clamped hard over his ears as if trying to block out the entire world. He saw his mother rush past the hallway, her face puffy from crying, her blonde hair disheveled, mascara smudged, speaking on the phone with a choked voice. He saw his father lock himself in his study for hours, his forehead resting on his palm, exhausted, aged, defeated. He saw therapists come and go with expressions of thinly veiled failure, carrying folders full of useless notes, and he saw, above all, the fear, not the adult's fear. That was obvious, loud, full of nervous words and desperate decisions, but Arthur's fear. A silent, deep, visceral fear that no one else seemed to see. A fear that screamed through those cries no one could decipher. One Thursday morning, Ayla arrived at the mansion and heard the cry even before his mother opened the kitchen door. It was a sound that pierced the soul, that went through walls, that made the air vibrate painfully. Helena rushed down the hallway. Barefoot, still in her robe, her blonde hair completely disheveled, yesterday's mascara smudged under her red eyes. "Joanna, please, clean the dining room, quickly. We have a meeting with another specialist in an hour. It needs to be spotless." Her voice trembled. Joanna nodded silently and entered, Ayla beside her, tiny, invisible. As Joanna wiped down the already spotless marble floor with a damp cloth, scrubbing at non-existent smudges just to justify her presence, Ayla stood at the entrance of the long hallway leading to Arthur's room. The cry was coming from there, persistent, desperate, incessant. She looked at her mother, who was cleaning in silence, her face set in concentration. Then she looked at the slightly ajar door at the end of the hall, and she took a step, then another, and one more. Joanna didn't see. She was facing away, scrubbing hard at an imaginary stain, lost in thoughts about bills to pay and the overdue rent. Ayla glided down the hallway, light as a shadow, making almost no sound, her small, bare feet on the cold marble. She pushed the door open slowly. The room was large, too bright, filled with expensive toys scattered chaotically on the floor. Imported wooden blocks, remote-control cars, educational puzzles, giant stuffed animals. And in the center, sitting on a plush white rug, was Arthur. He rocked back and forth frantically, his hands pressed his ears with brutal force, his eyes squeezed shut with such tension that his little face contorted. The cry came from him as if something inside were literally shattering, as if his soul were trying to escape that small body. Ayla wasn't afraid. She didn't hesitate. She entered. She closed the door behind her carefully. She sat on the floor at a safe distance, far enough not to startle him, but close enough for him to know he wasn't alone. And she stayed there, completely still, just watching, breathing slowly, waiting. The cry continued for a few more minutes that felt like hours. Then very slowly, gradually, it diminished in intensity. Arthur opened his eyes. He saw the girl. He didn't react with fear or surprise. He just stared at her, as if trying to understand what she was doing there, why she wasn't screaming back, why she wasn't touching him, forcing him, invading him. Ayla took something out of her worn backpack, a glass cup, simple, clear, ordinary, the kind you use in regular people's kitchens. Inside, a little water from the bottle she always carried. She ran her index finger around the rim of the glass, slowly, applying light pressure, moving in a constant circle. The glass began to vibrate, and from the vibration, a sound was born. High-pitched, clean, crystalline. A pure sound that cut through the air without hurting, that filled the space without invading. Arthur stopped rocking completely, his eyes fixed on the cup as if it were the first real thing he had seen in weeks. Ayla did it again. Another sound. Deeper this time, adjusting the amount of water with intuitive precision. Then another, and more. She created a sequence, a simple yet hypnotic melody made of pure vibrations, of frequencies that dialogued with something deep in the boy's brain. Arthur tilted his head. His shoulders, once as tense as stone, relaxed. His hands fell from his ears. His breathing normalized. And then, very slowly, hesitantly, he extended his small hand. He touched the glass. He felt the vibration on his fingertips. And he smiled. It was a brief smile, almost imperceptible, a tremor at the corners of his mouth. But it was there. Real. True. For the first time in 3 hellish weeks, Arthur wasn't screaming. He wasn't crying. He wasn't hiding behind his hands. He was there, present, connected to another human being. Alive. Outside, in the silent hallway, the mansion's security camera recorded everything. Every second, every movement, every sound, every smile. Helena was the first to see it. She was in the monitoring room on the ground floor of the mansion, reviewing the morning's recordings, a recent obsession, born from the desperation to understand what triggered her son's crises, searching for patterns where perhaps there were none. When she saw the scene in Arthur's room, she froze. An unknown girl, alone, inside the room, with her son. Arthur was smiling. She rewound, watched it again, and again. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her hands trembled over the mouse. Her heart pounded. Was this real? She called her husband. He came running from his study, still holding his phone, interrupting an important international call with Japanese investors. They watched together in absolute silence. They saw Ayla enter, small and discreet. They saw her sit down with a calm impossible for an 8-year-old child. They saw her take the cup from her backpack. They saw her produce those strange, hypnotic, inexplicable sounds. They saw Arthur touch the glass. They saw the smile, the damn smile they hadn't seen in weeks. Helena covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filling with tears. Her husband just murmured, his voice hoarse, "Who is this girl? Where did she come from?" Joanna was called to the office. She walked up the stairs slowly, each step weighing like lead, her heart clenched in a knot of anxiety. She knew something had happened, but she didn't know what. When she entered the immense office, she saw the two employers sitting behind the enormous imported mahogany desk, a desk worth more than 3 years of her salary. Helena had red, swollen eyes. Her husband, his face closed, impenetrable, dangerous. Joanna felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. Was she going to be fired? Had Ayla done something wrong? Broken something expensive? "Joanna," Helena began, her voice trembling but controlled, "your daughter entered Arthur's room this morning, alone. No authorization." The silence that followed was dense, heavy, suffocating. Joanna felt her blood run cold. Panic rose in her throat. I didn't know, Mom. She must have. I didn't see. I was cleaning the living room. I'm so sorry. It won't happen again. I promise." "Wait." Her husband raised a hand, interrupting the nervous flow of words. "Joanna, see this first?" He spun the laptop towards her. On the screen, the recording. Joanna watched, mute, her eyes wide. She saw Ayla enter. She saw the glass. She heard the sounds. She saw Arthur. She saw the smile. She felt something strange in her chest, a mix of pride, fear, and confusion. Helena stood up, her legs wobbly, and walked around the table. She stood before Joanna, looking directly into her eyes. "Joanna, what was that? What did she do? How did she know?" Joanna looked at the screen, then at her employers, trying to find words. "I don't know how to explain it properly, Mom. Ayla, ever since she was little, she's loved sounds, noise, music. At school, she's always experimenting with glasses, empty bottles, pots and pans. Her science teacher once said she has a different kind of hearing, that she hears things other kids don't." "Different how?" Her husband leaned forward, suddenly interested, his investor brain already processing information, looking for patterns, opportunities. "She hears frequencies. I think that's what they call it. Vibrations. Things we don't notice. I can't explain it well because I don't understand it, but the teacher said it's rare, that she should get some tests. But tests are expensive and Helena sat down again, her hands visibly trembling. "Joanna, do you understand what happened here? In 3 weeks, we've brought 6 different specialists into this house. Specialists from 3 different countries. None of them could calm my son. None. We've spent a fortune. We've tried everything. And your daughter's in 5 minutes. With a glass of water." The sentence hung in the air, unfinished, impossible to complete, because to finish it would be to admit something that shattered all the certainties of that family. Joanna didn't know what to say. She didn't know if she should apologize or thank them. She didn't know if she was in trouble or being praised. Helena's husband exchanged a long, meaningful look with his wife. Then he turned back to Joanna. "Joanna, we want to talk to her. To Ayla, in person. May we? Do you permit it?" Joanna hesitated. Every maternal instinct screamed danger. Rich people wanting to talk to her daughter. That never ended well. But what would she say? No, to her employers. I can call her, yes, but carefully, please. She's shy, easily scared." "Of course, with all the care in the world." Ayla was called. She entered the office with small, hesitant steps, her backpack still on her back as if it were armor, her large eyes observing everything. Helena knelt in front of her, trying to appear less intimidating, trying to smile through the tears that threatened to fall. "Hi, Ayla. You don't need to be afraid of anything, okay? No one is angry. We just want to chat for a little bit. You went into Arthur's room this morning, right?" Ayla looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked back at Helena. "I did. Why? What were you going to do in there? He was screaming so loudly. I thought he was scared, very scared. Helena blinked, surprised, her voice faltering. Scared? Scared of what, Ayla? Ayla shrugged, the universal gesture of children facing the inexplicable. I don't really know, but when we're very scared, sometimes it helps to hear something that calms us, something that reminds us the world isn't just noise. My mom sings to me when I have nightmares. I can't sing very well. So I made the sound of the glass. Helena's husband approached, crouching down as well to be at the girl's level. Ayla, and the glass. Where did you get that idea? Who taught you? Ms. Mariana, at school. She taught us that sound is vibration, that we can make music with anything that vibrates. I tried to make a sound that wouldn't scare him, a gentle sound, one that doesn't hurt the ears. And you knew it would work? Ayla shook her head. No, I just tried. Because no one else was trying to hear what he needed. The sentence dropped like a bomb into the silence of the office. No one else was trying to hear. An 8-year-old child had just diagnosed the problem of an entire family, of an entire team of specialists. They were all trying to fix, medicate, control. No one was listening. Helena's husband cleared his throat, clearly moved. Ayla, can you do that again? Tomorrow, with Arthur, can you? We'd like to understand better. To see if it works other times? Ayla looked at her mother. Joanna was tense, every muscle rigid, but she nodded slowly. I can try, Ayla said, her voice tiny but firm. The next day, Ayla returned to the mansion. This time she wasn't an invisible companion to her mother. She was welcomed as a guest. Helena personally took her to Arthur's room. The occupational therapist was there, watching with barely concealed professional skepticism. The father, too, arms crossed, filming everything with his cell phone. Ayla entered slowly, sat on the floor as she had before, and took 3 glass cups from her backpack. She filled them with different amounts of water, measuring only by sight, with impossible intuitive precision. Arthur was in the corner, rocking, hands over his ears, moaning softly. Ayla began to play, low tones first, then high ones, alternating, creating a melody that rose and fell like gentle waves, like breathing, like a heartbeat. Arthur stopped rocking. He turned his head. He looked at her. He slowly approached, hesitant, curious. He touched one of the glasses with his index finger. He felt the vibration, and he smiled, the same smile, real, true, undeniable. The therapist recorded everything on her tablet, her hands trembling. Then, with tear-filled eyes, she whispered, In 15 years of practice, I've never seen anything remotely like this. Never. Helena cried openly, shamelessly, without trying to hide it. Her husband remained silent, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the scene, processing, calculating, planning. And Joanna, standing at the bedroom door, watching from a distance, saw her daughter do what renowned university doctors, PhD therapists, specialists who charge thousands of dollars an hour couldn't do: reach Arthur. But something inside her, an ancient, wise instinct forged in decades of invisibility and survival, knew that this wouldn't end well. Because the world doesn't usually thank those who solve problems that the powerful couldn't solve on their own. The world usually fears. It destroys, it punishes the audacity of those who shine from where they shouldn't. The news spread slowly at first, but with a growing, inexorable force, like a wave that starts small on the horizon and gains height until it crashes violently on the shore. First, it was a discreet Instagram post from the therapist, an artistic, blurred photo of 3 glass tumblers with water lit by natural light, accompanied by a carefully enigmatic caption. Sometimes, healing comes from where we least expect it. Empathy doesn't require a degree. Listening doesn't need a certificate. Autism, sheen, inclusion, communication. The post got a few thousand likes, heartfelt comments, and shy shares. Then a week later, It was an interview on a popular podcast about autism and neurodiversity, where the therapist, without revealing names for privacy reasons, told the story of an 8-year-old child with rare auditory sensitivity who managed to establish communication with an autistic child using only glasses of water and intuition. The episode went viral. It hit #1 on the charts. Then, a month after the incident, an article was published in the academic journal of a university in São Paulo, a serious scientific text signed by 3 researchers titled Intuitive Sonic Communication: The Case of a Child with Differentiated Auditory Perception. And then, inevitably, the mainstream media came knocking. Helena and her husband, initially reluctant and protective, eventually agreed to a controlled feature in a major national newspaper. They thought they could control the narrative, maintain Arthur's privacy, protect Ayla, mitigate damage, and reap the benefits of a positive story. They were dead wrong. They were about to discover that no one controls the narrative when it involves class, race, and the improbable. The headline of the report, published on a Sunday on the front page of the science section, was "8-year-old girl achieves what science couldn't, calming autistic child with water glasses." The subtitle, "Ayla, daughter of a cleaner, uses rare auditory perception to create empathy music. Experts want to study the phenomenon." The main photo took up half a page. It was of Ayla, sitting on the pristine floor of Arthur's room, surrounded by clear glasses, her brown eyes focused, her pigtails perfectly symmetrical, her small, dark hands gently touching the rim of a glass. In the background, intentionally blurred but recognizable to those who knew him, Arthur was smiling. The caption explained with careful but impactful detail, "Ayla, just 8 years old, daughter of Joanna, a cleaner who works in a mansion in the southern zone of São Paulo, intuitively developed a sonic communication technique that calmed a 4-year-old autistic child after weeks of meltdowns that renowned specialists couldn't resolve." The reaction was explosive and instantaneous. Within 48 hours, the article had over 2 million online views, tens of thousands of shares across all social media platforms, thousands of comments violently divided into opposing camps, some celebrated with fervor. This shows that intelligence and sensitivity aren't about money, degrees, or titles. They're about humanity. This girl is a genius, a prodigy. Someone needs to study this urgently. The cleaner's daughter saved the boss's son. What a beautiful twist. Others attacked with venom. Completely irresponsible to leave an untrained child with no qualifications, alone with a vulnerable autistic child. What if it had gone wrong? What if she had scared the boy even more? This is negligence. The parents should be sued for putting their child at risk. There were those who questioned the veracity with deep cynicism. Another fabricated story to go viral. I bet it's marketing for some NGO. None of this happened. It's all staged, and there were those who saw beyond, with an unsettling clarity. This girl has a rare gift. Someone needs to protect her before they exploit her, before they destroy her. Ayla became a symbol overnight. A symbol of what? No one agreed. For some, it was proof that talent and intelligence transcend social class. For others, it was the dangerous romanticization of poverty. For some, it was a scientific miracle waiting to be studied. For others, it was charlatanism disguised as science. Universities from 3 different states sent formal invitations for testing. High-profile television programs wanted to interview her live. An international autism NGO expressed interest in funding research. A book publisher offered a contract to publish the story. Educational toy brands reached out wanting partnerships. Joanna, completely frightened and overwhelmed, refused almost everything. She locked herself at home with Ayla on weekends. She stopped answering calls from unknown numbers, but she accepted an invitation that seemed legitimate, serious, scientific, from the University of São Paulo. She took Ayla there on a rainy Tuesday. The campus was immense, intimidating, filled with buildings that looked like temples of knowledge. They were received by a group of researchers from the Department of Neuroscience and Cognitive Psychology. They placed headphones on Ayla, large, padded headphones that completely covered her ears. They conducted complex auditory exams, high-precision audiometries, frequency discrimination tests, tonal perception analyses. They asked her to identify sounds at different frequencies, to reproduce patterns, to create sequences. Ayla obeyed everything with patience and curiosity, without fear, simply intrigued by so many machines and screens. The results came 2 weeks later in a 20-page technical report that Joanna could barely understand, but the conclusion was clear. Ayla had auditory sensitivity significantly above the population average for frequencies between 1,000 and 4,000 Hz, precisely the range the human brain processes with the most emotional attention, the range where the nuances of the human voice, a baby's cry, sounds of alarm and comfort reside. She doesn't just hear better, explained the lead researcher, a middle-aged man with round glasses and a measured voice during a meeting in which Helena and her husband insisted on being present. She intuitively selects and produces sounds that calm the autonomic nervous system. It's an extremely sophisticated form of non-verbal communication, but completely intuitive. She didn't learn this. She just knows. It's like someone who is born knowing how to sing in tune without ever having had music lessons. Helena watched the explanation with wide eyes, her mouth slightly open, trying to process the magnitude of it all. The husband, seated beside her, took meticulous notes in an expensive leather-bound journal, underlining keywords, scribbling in the margins, his investor brain already mapping out possibilities, opportunities, impacts. Joanna, in the chair next to him, simply held Ayla's hand, trying to grasp what all of this meant for her daughter's future. After the meeting, in the university parking lot, Helena's husband called Joanna over for a private chat. He asked Ayla to play on the nearby playground for a bit, under Helena's supervision. Once they were alone, he cut straight to the chase. "Joanna, I'd like to propose something very serious." His voice was firm, but there was something uncomfortable, almost guilty, in his clear blue eyes. "I want to establish a foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to researching, developing and implementing inclusive communication methods for children with autism and other neurodivergencies. Therapies based on sound, music, vibration, frequencies. I want to fund serious scientific studies. I want to train therapists. I want this to help not just Arthur, but thousands of other children who are being over-medicated, institutionalized, isolated, because no one can truly hear them." Joanna listened in silence, her face neutral, hands clasped over her worn purse. "And I want you to be the Foundation's chief operating officer." Joanna blinked, her expression finally breaking into genuine surprise. "Me, sir? But I only know how to clean houses. I don't have the education for that. I didn't even finish high school." "You know much more than how to clean houses, Joanna," he sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "I spent 3 months bringing the best professionals in the world into my home. Neurologists from American universities, therapists with doctorates from 3 countries. I paid fortunes you can't even imagine. And who saved my son, who truly reached him, was your daughter. An 8-year-old girl you raised alone, I imagine, coming from Paralelos every day before sunrise, working 12-hour shifts. This isn't just about sound or frequency or science. This is about empathy, about dignity, about seeing what no one else can see because they're too busy with protocols and procedures. And you, Joanna, you raised this girl, alone, teaching her to be who she is. That's worth infinitely more than any diploma." Joanna felt her eyes sting, her throat tighten, but she didn't cry. Not in front of him, not yet. And Ayla, what will happen to her? Ayla will continue to be a child. I won't exploit her. I won't put her on TV shows. I won't turn her into a spokeskid. She'll study, play, grow up in peace. But if she wants to, in the future, when she's ready, if she wants to help other children like Arthur, we'll ensure she has all the necessary support. Quality education, mentorship with the best, full scholarships, everything, whatever it takes. Joanna looked out the car window. Outside, she saw the immense city stretching to the horizon, the same city she crossed every day before dawn, on crowded buses, carrying her lunchbox and exhaustion. I accept, she said finally, her voice firm, but with one non-negotiable condition, which is, the foundation will serve children from low-income neighborhoods too. Not just those who can afford it, not just those who live in gated communities, every child who needs it, free of charge, no exceptions. The man extended his hand. For the first time since Arthur had started crying months ago, he truly smiled. Deal. You have my word. But as the foundation began to take shape, as lawyers drafted bylaws and accountants opened bank accounts, something sinister and dangerous brewed in the shadows of the internet. Anonymous messages started arriving. Emails with no identifiable sender. Comments on social media from fake profiles created solely to attack. Always the same tone, always the same poisonous message. Beware of this girl. Children like that are dangerous. No one has that kind of power naturally. Or, this isn't a gift. It's manipulation. You're being deceived. Or even, there's something very wrong with this story. Investigate the mother. I bet it's a scam. Helena ignored them at first, deleting and blocking. But when she received a physical letter, sent through the mail, with no return address, the address of the mansion written in shaky handwriting, saying only, "Get this girl out of your house before it's too late. You've been warned." She felt real fear for the first time. Fear not for her son, fear for Ayla. She called Joanna immediately, showed her the letter. "What do we do? Call the police? Hire security?" Joanna read the letter, her eyes hardening, her jaw clenching. She folded the paper and handed it back. "We don't do anything they want us to do. We don't bow down to anonymous coward threats. We keep going." "But what if—" "There are no what-ifs, Helena." Joanna called her by her first name for the first time. "The world doesn't forgive those who shine from where they're not supposed to. They'll try to extinguish my daughter's light because she dares to exist, dares to be intelligent, dares to do what they can't. But I won't let them. Never." Helena saw something in Joanna's eyes at that moment, something ancient, something forged in generations of resistance, something unshakable. "Then we keep going together," Helena said. "Together," Joanna confirmed. But inside, they both knew the storm was just beginning. The tension exploded on a Thursday morning, 4 months after Ayla and Arthur's first meeting, when a video leaked online. Someone, it was never discovered who, despite subsequent investigations, lawsuits, and even cyber police involvement, had gained access to the mansion's security cameras, copied and strategically edited scenes, maliciously interspersing them with clips from documentaries about medical charlatanism, therapeutic fraud, and famous cases of false prodigies. The video's title, published simultaneously on 3 different platforms by profiles that disappeared minutes later, "The Miracle Girl Farce: How a Rich Family Was Deceived by an Opportunistic Cleaner." The video was sophisticated, well edited, convincing to those who didn't know the facts. It showed Ayla entering the room, but the audio was replaced by ominous narration. See how the child enters alone, unsupervised, at a moment of extreme family vulnerability. It showed the cups, but with cuts that made it seem staged. Everything planned, everything calculated. It showed Arthur's smile, but immediately followed by images of autistic children in real meltdowns, creating a false cause and effect association. A momentary smile does not mean a cure. It means emotional manipulation. The video went viral with terrifying speed. In 12 hours, 5 million views. Within 24 hours, it was all over primetime TV news. Within 48 hours, politicians were weaponizing the case in speeches about child protection and regulating alternative therapies. The narrative had completely spun out of control. Far-right digital influencers started using the case as an example of perverted values and cultural Marxism infiltrating science. Others, on the left, tried to defend Ayla, but in a patronizing and condescending way. Poor little girl, being exploited by the media and her wealthy family. Both sides were wrong. Both sides dehumanized Ayla, turning her into a symbol, a flag, an object of political discourse. Helena plunged into absolute panic. She didn't sleep for 3 nights straight. She was popping anxiety pills like candy. Her husband fielded furious calls from investors worried about their reputation. The family's public image was being shredded in real time, comment by comment, share by share. The pressure was unbearable, suffocating, violent. He called an emergency meeting, expensive lawyers from 3 different firms, crisis management PR specialists, communications consultants, and Joanna. Joanna, we need to make an urgent public statement. We need to clarify the facts before the lie solidifies as truth. But for it to be truly effective, we need Ayla to appear in a controlled interview with pre-approved questions in a safe environment. Joanna stood up, her eyes sparking with contained fury. No! Joanna, please understand. I said no. My daughter will not be exposed any more than she already has been. She's 8 years old. 8 years. One of the lawyers, a man in an impeccable suit with a cold voice, intervened. Miss Joanna, with all due respect, if we don't do something proactive now, immediately, this will destroy everything. The foundation that's being established, your daughter's reputation, her future, everything. We're talking about nationwide defamation. Lawsuits will take years. Public opinion needs to be turned around now. Then let it be destroyed. Joanna's voice was steel. Destroy everything. Close the foundation. Shred the papers. But I will not put my daughter in front of a camera, in front of millions of people, to prove anything to anyone. She doesn't need to prove she exists, that she's smart, that she's human. The silence that followed was sepulchral, heavy, awkward. Helena, who had been sitting in a corner of the office until then, her hands trembling in her lap, finally stood up. She walked over to Joanna, stood before her, eye to eye. 2 mothers, 2 worlds. But in that painful moment, the same pain. Joanna, I understand. I swear I understand. I'm a mother too. If it were Arthur, I'd do anything to protect him, anything. But think, if we don't respond, if we let the lie grow, Ayla will carry this for the rest of her life. They'll call her a fraud, an opportunist. They'll destroy not just her present, but her future. Every time she tries to do something, they'll remember this twisted story. Joanna closed her eyes, took a deep breath. When she opened them, there were tears, the first Helena had seen. Then I'll respond. I'll go on camera. I'll speak. I'll explain. I'll expose myself. But not Ayla. She stays out of it. Joanna. It's this or nothing, Helena. You choose. Helena looked at her husband. He nodded slowly. All right. You respond. Alone. The interview was scheduled for 3 days later on one of the most respected news programs on American television, broadcast live in prime time. Joanna spent 2 days rehearsing with the communications advisors who tried to soften her speech, polish her answers, make her more palatable. She sent them away on the 2nd day. I'll speak the way I know how, the way I am, or I won't. On the night of the interview, Joanna sat before the cameras. She wore simple but dignified clothing, her hair pulled back, no heavy makeup, no jewelry, no affectations. Just her. The journalist, an experienced woman known for tough interviews, started with soft questions, establishing context, building narrative. But she soon went for the jugular. "Joanna, there are millions of people saying on social media that you used your daughter to get close to a wealthy family, to take advantage of their vulnerability. What do you say to these serious accusations?" Joanna didn't look away. She looked directly into the camera at the millions of unseen eyes behind it. "I say that whoever says that has never woken up at 4 in the morning to catch 2 crowded buses and a subway full of people pushing you. Never scrubbed the floor of a stranger's house for 12 hours straight until your back ached so much you couldn't sleep right. Never came home after midnight with a destroyed body and still had to make dinner for your child with whatever energy you had left. I don't need to use anyone. I work. I've always worked, since I was 14. And I taught my daughter the same thing. Work, dignity, and empathy. That's what she did in that room. Nothing more, nothing less. But Ayla isn't trained. She has no credentials. She's not a specialist. How did she know what to do when renowned professionals failed? She knew because she listened." Joanna's voice was firm now, gaining strength. "Because she saw, because she cared. She didn't go into that room thinking about fame or money or recognition. She went in because she heard a boy crying in fear and wanted to help. And that, it seems, is something no degree teaches. It's something no money can buy. It's something we learn when life teaches us to resist, to survive, to not lose our humanity, even when the world tries to rip it out of you every single day." The sentence cut the air like a sharp blade. The journalist blinked, clearly impacted. Social media exploded instantly. Memes were created in seconds. Clips of her speech were cut and shared millions of times. Heated debates filled every platform, but the tide, slowly but perceptibly, began to turn. The next day, Arthur's therapist posted an unsolicited interview on her own profile, saying with tears in her eyes, "Ayla did something that I, with 15 years of study and practice, should have done and didn't." She listened, not with technique, not with protocol, with presence, with humanity. "And I publicly apologize for not seeing that before." Other healthcare professionals followed: pediatricians, psychologists, occupational therapists. They publicly acknowledged the value of what had happened. They apologized for their initial skepticism. They admitted they had a lot to learn. And then, a week after Joanna's interview, Helena posted a video. Simple, no fancy editing, filmed in Arthur's room. It showed Arthur and Ayla sitting on the floor, each holding a cup. Together, guided by Ayla but with Arthur actively participating, they created a simple, beautiful, childlike melody. Arthur looked at the camera and said, with a clarity impossible for anyone who knew him before, "Music. I like music." The video got 20 million views in 48 hours, and the debate completely shifted tone. 5 months after the interview that changed the public narrative, the foundation was officially launched. The ceremony took place in a renovated building in downtown Chicago, a spacious and bright area that had once housed an abandoned factory and was now a center for therapy, research, and training. The name, chosen after weeks of discussion, the Ayla Institute, Communication Through Listening. The logo, a vibrating glass of water, the sound waves represented by elegant concentric circles. Joanna, as Director of Operations, spoke at the inauguration ceremony. She wore formal but comfortable clothing, chosen with Helena's help, but it still felt strange on her body, accustomed to work uniforms. Beside her, Ayla, now 9 years old, wore a simple dress that her maternal grandmother had sewn personally, each stitch made with love and pride. Helena and her husband applauded from the front row. Arthur, now almost 5 years old and making extraordinary progress, held Ayla's hand with familiarity and affection. "I don't know how to give a fancy speech," Joanna began, her voice trembling slightly but firm in its intent. "I didn't study for this. I didn't learn it in college. But I learned in life that we can only truly listen when we stop thinking we already know everything. This institute doesn't exist to teach technique. It exists to teach listening, to teach that every child, no matter how their brain works, deserves to be heard, deserves to be seen, deserves to be respected. And that goes for a child from a gated community or a child from the inner city, for everyone. The Institute began serving children from all social classes, exactly as Joanna had demanded: the suburbs, the inner cities, gated communities, middle-class neighborhoods. There was no distinction. There was no preferential treatment for those who could pay. Services were free for everyone, funded by donations and significant personal investment from Arthur's family. Therapists were trained in a new methodology, still in development, but based on simple principles. Observe before diagnosing, listen before speaking, understand before medicating, respect before correcting. Isla didn't become a celebrity. She wasn't exploited. She didn't appear on TV shows or become a spokesperson. She went back to being a child. She attended a private school on a full scholarship provided by the foundation. She played with friends. She took music lessons. She read comic books, but once a week, always on Wednesday afternoons, she visited the Institute. She sat with autistic children with ADHD, with children with severe anxiety, with children the world considered difficult. And she played with glasses, and she listened, and she taught others how to listen. Joanna continued to work, but now she worked somewhere else, in another role, with another dignity, at the institute that bore her daughter's name. And every morning upon arrival, she would look at the logo on the entrance wall, that vibrating glass, those expanding waves, and smile. Sometimes she still couldn't believe it. Sometimes she woke up thinking it was a dream, but it was real. Helena became an active volunteer at the Institute, not as a director or coordinator, but as an assistant. She helped at the reception, organized materials, talked with worried parents in the waiting room. She learned to truly listen, not just wait for her turn to speak. She learned to see beyond appearances, beyond clothes, beyond accents, beyond addresses. She learned with Joanna the true meaning of humility, not as subservience, but as genuine recognition that we all have something to learn from everyone. And Helena's husband, he never spoke again about admitting his son to a clinic in Switzerland. He never again sought a cure, as if autism were a disease to be eradicated. Because he finally understood that the problem had never been with Arthur. The problem was with a world that didn't know how to listen to him, that didn't have the patience to understand him, that tried to force him into boxes where he would never fit. Arthur remained autistic, but he began to flourish. 6 months after its opening, the Institute published its first scientific study based on Ayla's methodology. It didn't try to turn it into a rigid protocol that would betray its essence, but it documented principles, frequencies that demonstrated statistical efficacy, approaches that could be replicated with training. The study was published in an international scientific journal and cited in research from 3 continents. Ayla was invited to give a lecture at a neuroscience conference at UCLA. Joanna initially refused, but Ayla wanted to. "I want to tell them, Mum. I want them to understand," so Joanna agreed, and watched from the back of the packed auditorium her 9-year-old daughter walk onto the stage and speak to hundreds of researchers, doctors and therapists. "People think communication is talking," Ayla said, her voice thin but clear into the microphone. "But it's not just that. Communication is also listening. It's perceiving what wasn't said. It's seeing the fear in the silence. It's understanding that when someone shouts, it might not be because they want to scare you, but because they are scared." The auditorium fell into absolute silence. Then a standing ovation that lasted 3 minutes. 5 years after that first silent encounter, Ayla was 13. She was in the 8th grade at one of Chicago's top private schools, but she hadn't lost her essence. She remained simple. She remained curious. She continued to hear what others didn't. And she still visited the Institute every Wednesday, now as a junior volunteer, working with younger children, teaching not just sound techniques, but, most importantly, the art of listening. "People think I work magic with glasses," she would say in lectures she now gave regularly at schools and conferences. "But it's not magic. It's attention, it's patience, it's caring enough to stop talking and start truly listening. Anyone can do it. You don't need special hearing. You need an open heart." Arthur, now 9 years old, attended regular school with pedagogical support. He had real friends, not just classmates who tolerated his presence. He participated in activities. He laughed out loud. He spoke. Not much, but he spoke when he wanted to, when it made sense, when he had something to say. And every week, religiously, he and Ayla would meet, sometimes at the Institute, sometimes at his house, sometimes at the park. They would sit on the floor, wherever they were, and they would play with glasses. It was no longer therapy. It was friendship. It was ritual. It was a private language that only the two of them completely understood. Joanna never went back to cleaning houses as a maid, but she never forgot where she came from. She kept in touch with former colleagues who still worked as housekeepers. She hired several of them to work at the Institute in administrative roles, with fair wages and respected benefits. And every time someone called her Director or Ms. Joanna with exaggerated reverence, she would gently but firmly correct them. "I'm Joanna, just Joanna. I'm a mother, I'm a worker. The rest is a consequence of what we build together." The Institute grew. It opened 2 branches in underserved neighborhoods. It trained over 200 therapists in 5 years. It provided free services to more than 3,000 children. It published 15 scientific studies. It changed treatment protocols in public health systems. It influenced public policy in 3 states. But most importantly, it restored dignity to the children served, to the families welcomed, to the professionals trained, and to Joanna and Ayla, who proved that intelligence, sensitivity, and the capacity to change the world don't reside in specific zip codes, don't require expensive degrees, and don't depend on important last names. Helena, who had previously been obsessed with appearances and control, transformed into one of the staunchest advocates for radical inclusion. She wrote articles. She participated in debates. She confronted prejudice from her own social circle with a courage she never knew she had. "I had everything," she said in an interview years later, "except humanity, less ability to see. Joanna and Ayla taught me that wealth without empathy is poverty." And Arthur? Arthur became a musician, not professionally. He was only 9 years old. But he discovered the piano was a form of communication words could never be. He composed simple, intuitive, beautiful melodies. And always, in every composition, he included a specific sequence of notes somewhere. The same sequence Ayla had created that first day with 3 glasses of water. It was his signature, his way of saying, "I remember. I'm grateful. I heard you listening to me." In that glass of water, vibrating between the small, dark hands of a girl the world tried to ignore, something much greater than an innovative therapy or a successful foundation was born. A bridge was born. Between isolation and understanding, between privilege and empathy, between noise and listening, between power and humanity, between those who were always heard and those who were always silenced. And perhaps, in the end, that is the greatest lesson of all, the lesson that will continue to vibrate long after all the characters in this story are gone. That true healing of people, of families, of societies, doesn't come from above. It doesn't come from expensive offices, framed diplomas, imported protocols, or invested fortunes. It comes from those who had the courage to sit on the floor beside those who suffer, to touch a common glass with the delicacy of someone who knows small gestures carry great meaning, to truly listen to what the silence is screaming. and to care, deeply, radically, unconditionally care, even when the whole world says that pain, that child, that life doesn't deserve attention. Joanna officially retired from the Institute at 55. 13 years after that first day, Ayla had entered Arthur's room. Not because she had to. Financially, she was more than comfortable for the first time in her life, but because she wanted time. Time to travel with her daughter, see the ocean for the first time, sleep in on Sundays, read the books she never had time for. At her farewell party, surrounded by hundreds of people whose lives she had touched directly or indirectly, she said only, "I cleaned a lot of houses in my life, but I discovered the most important house we need to clean is the one in our heart. To clear out the trash of prejudice, arrogance, indifference, then we can truly hear." Ayla, at 18, took the college entrance exams for neuroscience. She placed first. But before starting university, she asked for a gap year. She wanted to travel, to see other countries, other institutes, other ways of communicating with neurodivergent children. Helena and her husband funded the trip as a gift. Joanna cried at the airport, but they were tears of pride, not fear. Her daughter was flying, literally and metaphorically. Arthur, at 14, composed his first complete song. He called it "The Sound of the Beginning." It was performed entirely with glass tumblers tuned to different frequencies, accompanied by piano. He presented it at a school recital. In the middle of the audience, Ayla, who had returned from her 6-month trip, transformed, matured, more certain than ever of her purpose, cried. At the end, Arthur came down from the stage and went to her. He handed her a common, clear glass tumbler, identical to the first. "For you to keep," he said. Because everything started here. The Institute continued to grow, but it never lost its essence. It never became corporate, cold, or bureaucratic. It always maintained its founding principle. Every child deserves to be heard, no matter where they come from. The methodology developed there was adopted in 43 countries. Universities on 5 continents studied the principles of therapeutic listening. But all the studies, all the theses, all the articles cited the same origin. An 8-year-old girl, the daughter of a cleaner, who sat on the floor and decided to listen. 10 years later, Ayla defended her doctorate in neuroscience with a thesis on non-verbal communication in neurodivergent contexts, an active listening-centered approach. The panel, composed of internationally renowned researchers, approved it with honors and distinction. But the most emotional moment wasn't the approval. It was when, at the end of the defense, Ayla expressed her gratitude. "To my mother, Joanna, who taught me that intelligence is built with dignity and work. And to Arthur, who taught me that communication doesn't need words when there is presence." Joanna, seated in the front row next to Helena, now true friends, not boss and employee, but sisters forged in the fire of mutual transformation, wept openly. Helena held her hand, and both understood in that moment something profound, that this story had never been about autism, about glasses of water, about innovative therapy. It was about something much more fundamental. It was about recognizing humanity, where society taught us to see invisibility. It was about building bridges where there were chasms. It was about choosing every day empathy over indifference. 15 years after that first meeting, the Institute hosted a commemorative event. Joanna, now 57 with white hair she wore with pride, was honored. Ayla, a doctor and scientific coordinator of the Institute, led the ceremony. Arthur, a professional musician specializing in sound therapy, presented a new composition. And hundreds of people, children who had been helped, parents who had been supported, therapists who had been trained, shared their stories. One in particular stood out. A mother walked onto the stage holding the hand of her 6-year-old son. "2 years ago," she said, her voice trembling, "I was about to give up. My son would scream, withdraw, and no one could help. They told me I should institutionalize him. They said he was a lost cause. Then I found this institute, and here, for the first time, someone didn't try to fix my son. Someone tried to listen to him. And we discovered he wasn't broken. The world was just deaf. The audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. That evening, after the event, Ayla, Joanna, Helena, Arthur, and Helena's husband, who was now the honorary president of the foundation, had dinner together at a casual diner, the kind Joanna used to frequent before everything changed. The choice was intentional, a way to remember, to not forget. "You know what I think sometimes?" Helena said, looking at Joanna. "I think if you hadn't brought Ayla that day, if she hadn't walked into that room, none of this would exist. Arthur might have been institutionalized. I might have been medicated into numbness, and thousands of children wouldn't have been heard." Joanna smiled. "Or maybe someone else would have heard, sooner or later. We like to think some people are special, that they do things no one else can. But the truth is simpler. Anyone can listen, anyone can care, anyone can sit on the floor next to someone who's suffering. We just have to choose to do it." Ayla looked at her mother with admiration that had never faded. "But you chose to raise me to be someone who makes those choices, Mom. That counts. And you chose to listen to Arthur," Arthur said, speaking more that night than he usually did, when no one else could. A comfortable silence settled in, the kind of silence that only exists between people who know each other deeply, who have been through fire together and emerged transformed. And there, at that simple table in an ordinary diner, 5 people from worlds once impossible to touch shared a meal. They shared a story. They shared living proof that the world can change, one listening at a time. One gesture at a time, one glass at a time. Because in the end, the ripple from that first glass of water never stopped. It continued to expand in ever-widening concentric waves, reaching people who would never hear the original story, but would feel its effects. Creating a new frequency in the world, a frequency of listening, of dignity, of hope. And maybe that's the real magic, not the glasses, not the frequencies, not the techniques, but the courage to believe that an 8-year-old girl, from where she shouldn't have come, knowing what she shouldn't have known, doing what experts couldn't do, could teach the world a lesson humanity has been forgetting for centuries. That true power isn't in who speaks the loudest. It's in who listens the deepest. So what did you think of this story? Did it make you think of anything? Did it touch you in some way? Did it make you reflect on who you listen to or choose not to listen to in your own life? Share in the comments what you felt, what you thought, if this story changed anything for you, even if it's small. And if you want to keep receiving stories like this, stories that aren't just entertainment, but that touch, that teach, that transform, that remind us of what truly matters, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because every week there's a new story waiting for you, a story that might be exactly what you need to hear that day. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, sometimes what changes the world isn't the noise, it's the listening. It's not who shouts the loudest, it's who has the courage to sit on the ground, in silence, and truly hear what the other's heart is saying. Bye, and thank you for being here.